So, this is a video I've been meaning to record forever. Maybe I'll make this into a podcast too. But I thought I would finally really share my story in detail, but also in kind of a shorter format so that people will actually watch it. So many of you might be following me for videos on Qigong or maybe on TikTok and Instagram for nutrition stuff. But basically, the main thing I talk about on some of those platforms recently, I had a video get over 1 million views on TikTok that was talking about my story going through mental health issues. I know that's kind of a buzzword these days, but I was fucked up before it was cool. But I think the video got a lot of traction because I wasn't talking about, here I was mentally ill and what we need to do is accept mentally ill people, or, come to terms with them, or stop stigmatizing mentally ill people. Like, everybody accept me more, please. It was totally away from, that seems like the script that's going around mostly in this kind of mental health buzz these days, and I think that's like totally useful. I'm sure there's been a lot of stigma against mentally ill people, but what I posted in my video was just talking about what I actually did. What did I do about it, right? And I did a lot. It was years of trying things and committing myself to this meditation practice or that diet or this cleanse or whatever. I tried a million things. A lot of them worked. More of them didn't do anything good, and a lot of them did more harm than good. But that was my message on the video. It was like, hey, look, like, it was super hard. It took me a long, long time, but I did overcome this stuff. And then after that, over 1 million people watched that. I think it's at like 1,100,000 or something, which is like by far way bigger than my YouTube videos if you're looking at the numbers on this channel. So a few of them followed me over here, so hi if that's one of you. And so I just thought I'd share a little more detail about what I actually did, what I was actually going through, and I'll try to keep it under 15 minutes and not totally bore you. I've been interviewed on a bunch of podcasts you might be able to find where I tell the stories in more detail. But it's kind of a wild ride. So the short and long of it is, yes, I was diagnosed psychotic. Yes, I believe I was psychotic. I don't believe it was a misdiagnosis. But on the other hand, also some of the things I was paranoid about, or the psychiatrist would say I was hallucinating, some of those things, not all of them, but some of them were actually true. And those things involved sort of the supernatural, psychic abilities and things like that. So if you're psychotic, be careful watching this video because I do talk about some stuff that might kind of trigger you. If you know somebody who's psychotic, this might help you help them. And really, this might be useful to anybody going through any mental illness or helping someone else with it, because I think they share a lot of common threads. So again, to be psychotic means to basically have delusions about reality. That would be like the gist of it. So oftentimes it's in the form of hallucinations, whether that's auditory, hearing voices, or visual, like seeing mythical archetypal figures or things like that. So in a lot of ways, it mimics like a hallucinogen, being under the influence of LSD or something like that and having a bad trip, right? And so the bad trip part of the LSD isn't the hallucination, but a lot of the beliefs that will go with it, like hallucinating. I had a friend in high school who hallucinated that the FBI was chasing him, and so he spent the whole trip jumping over people's fences through their backyards trying to escape the imaginary FBI. So there's the hallucination, the FBI, and the belief that it's real, right? And that so it was all this paranoia together with the hallucinations. And so similar to a experience on a hallucinogen like magic mushrooms or LSD, that desire to control the experience can be part of what leads to the negative experience. So what I experienced was, for the most part, just being intensely paranoid all the time. But once in a while, especially after I started learning yoga and meditation and skills like that, I was able to sort of relax into it. And so even though there were still hallucinations, those hallucinations took on a more positive tone. So instead of voices telling me what a piece of shit I was all day, I would have moments where I could relax, I could surrender into it. And weirdly enough, I started seeing like religious symbolism, Hindu gods, and have experiences of like chakras opening, and that connected me to different Hindu deities. I don't know why I had this Hindu theme going on. I think maybe because I was starting to get into yoga, or I don't know. But it was pretty strange. Even like Hindu gods that still don't even know if they exist. Like my mind was just creating them or something. It wasn't any particular god, or maybe it was a particular one, but I don't actually know them. But maybe they actually exist if I look them up. I don't really know. But it was very beautiful, and that beauty was totally reliant on my ability to relax and let go into it, which is sort of what yoga taught me. So I know a lot of Christians might be watching this like, see, I told you yoga causes psychosis, and those gods are really demons coming into your body after yoga. And no, the yoga I started after I went psychotic as the tool to deal with it. It was kind of one of my first tools. And something that just went along with that was like really beautiful, blissful experiences of these religious visions and blissful energy moving through the body, and that was actually healing for the psychotic experience. It did not push it further along or make it worse or anything. So nothing like that. Although I can understand why people raised in another tradition would look at the Hindu gods and think like, oh my God, yoga causes demons, because look at these gods with 1,000 arms, and their tongue is 2 feet long sticking out, and one of them's holding decapitated human heads, and they kind of look like demonic in some of the depictions. Same with some of the Tibetan Buddhist deities, right? So I can see why people would think that. But anyways, so for me, luckily I wasn't so far gone in my psychosis that I couldn't think for myself, or that I was so distrustful of other people that I couldn't take advantage of the mental health resources, or my mom telling me I should try yoga or things like that. So when people tried to help me, I actually was able to receive the help, because I wasn't so convinced that my delusions were true that I couldn't hear them. And this is where I get stuck with a lot of people who reach out to me like, oh, my son or my brother or my friend is psychotic, and they're living on the street because they think everybody who's trying to help them is like in on it, right? Whatever their delusion is, like aliens are running the planet and everybody's in on it but you, or something. And you get a lot of stuff like that. And those are the hardest people to help, right? Because in order for the holistic way to help with this, the person has to be an active participant, right? And so I was able to be my own active participant because I really wanted to get better, and I was just kind of not quite far enough into it yet that I could kind of believe that maybe I was just tripping out and it wasn't real. So there was enough of me still there to actually help myself and to receive help. But it's very hard if that's not the case, and that's why institutions came about back in the day, right, where they would just force people into the institution and force them to take medication and force them into a straitjacket to not hurt themselves. And I don't know if we force people that much these days, unless they maybe look like they're going to commit suicide or something. But that's a hard thing to do with the holistic path. So this is the kind of thing you really want to catch early in order to actually be able to do something. Anyway, so how did this start? Like, what was I paranoid about? Well, my psychiatrist probably to this day would not believe me, but I did. I was in high school. I was using a lot of LSD and magic mushrooms, and I was having, maybe a lot of you don't know this, but these can produce profound spiritual, religious experiences. I was having sort of the opposite of what they did for a lot of people. So a lot of people take these drugs and they're like, oh my God, like my parents are wrong. Like life's not all about hard work. It's about having fun. And you know, I should quit engineering school and become an artist or something. Like, I feel like that's more the stereotype of what happens with these, but I was having a lot of the opposite. Like I'd go on a mushroom trip and I'll think about my parents, be like, man, my parents really love me. Like, why am I rebelling against them so much? And why am I not trying hard in school? Like, I want to grow up and get married and have kids. Like, I didn't even realize I had that desire, but this magic mushrooms are like bringing out that desire in me, and maybe I should study hard and go to school. And so it was kind of a mixed bag of what she got out of them, but usually almost all my experiences were something healing. It brought me in a positive direction, although I wasn't always able to implement it because once the drug wore off, there wasn't a whole lot there to like ground that into action and discipline and habits that actually improved my life long term. But the experience was nice, and a lot of them I wouldn't trade for anything because they really changed my life. But I did have a couple experiences where apparently these substances open up the ability to use certain psychic abilities. The one that I experienced was telepathy, being able to communicate your thoughts between people. So I had an experience where me and other people sent thoughts to each other, and another experience where, so in this experience we were all in the same room, and another experience where I sent it across like several city blocks to another person that I wasn't in the same room as, obviously. So I had those two were kind of the main experience with that, both of them under the influence of LSD. And probably a lot of people are rolling their eyes at that, but I have my reasons why I know that those two experiences are real. But after that, I got really paranoid, thinking like, wait, where does this end? Like, I'm not on LSD right now, but I am high on weed. So does weed let me be telepathic? Or I'm not on anything right now, but maybe some of it's still in my system and my mind's more open, and maybe I've opened some gate in my brain that now I can just use telepathy anytime. And at first that sounded really cool. It was like, oh shit, like I can use this to make girls like me or to sound really cool or something like that. And I thought it would be like this awesome superpower. And so I kind of like tried to abuse it, but I don't think it really worked because I don't think you can use it without those substances, or something like special has to happen in your brain for that ability to be activated. I'm not sure why this isn't more common knowledge. I've read it on a bunch of experience reports online of people who've used those types of drugs and they've had similar experiences. But like in the common world, it seems like, you know, like you talk to like the top neuroscientists, people who've like researched government studies on like the CIA and everything was trying to use psychic powers to fight the Russians in the Cold War and stuff. And it is just not common knowledge that it's actually an ability that humans can do, at least under the condition of being on a psychedelic drug, which you think would be like just such common knowledge, since it's really easy as far as I can tell. Because it was so easy, I got really paranoid that I couldn't control it, and I'll just be walking around like, wait, can people hear this thought? Can people hear that thought? Can people hear this thought? Shit, don't think of anything embarrassing. Don't think of anything mean that would hurt somebody's feelings. Don't think of this. Don't think of that. And the more you didn't want to think about that, the more it was all you could think about, because trying not to think about something makes you think about it. And so I was like a totally like socially awkward, social anxiety kind of teenager, which I'm sure tons of people are. But it was definitely pretty pronounced in me for sure. And just got really paranoid about that. Eventually stopped going to school because I thought everybody was hearing my thoughts all the time, including my neighbors. And then I started hallucinating other people's voices in my head, like, hey, we don't want to hear your fucking thoughts anymore. We don't want to watch you take a shit on the toilet anymore. We don't want to all this like horrible stuff. And those voices got really dark, and it was all like sounded like people I knew, and it was all very convincing. Later on, I had this interesting experience. I was doing like a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat, and it was the last day of the retreat. Everybody went home. I was waiting for someone to come pick me up, and I was just kind of walking through the woods while I waited. And I came across this clearing where the sun was like shining. There was like an opening in the trees in the canopy, and the sunlight was shining down onto this tree stump. And but before I noticed that, I was walking, kind of watching my feet, doing a little walking meditation. And this like thought came into my mind, like, if those voices were so good at convincing me they were real people, like maybe I'd be a good like fiction writer, like writing screenplays or novels or something. Because maybe I could write like really believable characters, and maybe I could just channel that into some like creative endeavor or something. And as that thought came to my mind, I like looked up, and this beam of light, like a pillar of light, is shining on this tree stump that had like the perfect like hawk's feather stuck into it. Somebody, I guess, had like stuck it there, and it just looked like a quill pen sticking out of this tree trunk. I was just like, whoa, crazy sign. That was another thing with my psychosis, was I saw omens everywhere. Just everything became an omen. People would go like, oh, it's 11:11. There's angels talking to me or something. And I was like that, but I made up a different meaning, or my brain made up a different meaning for like every time. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe there's like interdimensional elves like telling me like when I'm thinking, I would just constantly look at the clock for some kind of reassurance that what I was thinking was the right thing to be thinking. And there's a bit of like obsessive compulsion to it for sure. But anyway, so creativity is actually really highly correlated with psychosis and schizophrenia. And there's actually a really interesting psychiatrist named Dr. I'm going to remember this because she was on Joe Rogan, and her name is Kelly Brogan. Dr. Kelly Brogan. who does like holistic psychiatry for people, and basically decided to forego putting people on all these meds. Or she felt like she saw the light or whatever, and that those weren't good for people, and started working with a doctor or a nutritionist and putting people through sort of nutrition programs. And the thing she found was schizophrenics would come out of her program and almost invariably would have some sort of creative pursuit. Not because her program, that was part of the program, just once their brains were better, they just suddenly felt like, oh, I need to channel this creative energy, and they would take up some kind of art. So there's a very high creativity, high openness trait that tends to correspond with these. And this also corresponds with taking psychedelics. They'll permanently increase your creativity and sort of open-mindedness, literally for the rest of your life. Obviously a whole lot while you're on them, but there's a permanent change to your brain becoming more open from taking them, which is probably why the government keeps them illegal. They don't want you too open-minded. But it's also why they can cause things like psychosis to a large degree, is because you get so open-minded that you become delusional. You start believing all kinds of crazy things. So that was kind of the state I was in, and eventually wound up in a mental hospital because my mom figured out I wasn't going to school and asked me why, and I told her because everybody was hearing my thoughts, or maybe they weren't. I wasn't really sure. And so alarm bells went off in her head, took me to the mental hospital. Spent about 2 weeks there. They put me on antipsychotics and tranquilizers and the whole shebang. And I didn't have to be forced to be there. I really wanted to be there because I really wanted to fix whatever was going on. But what I got really surprised by was how the psychiatrists or nurses or whoever was like interviewing me and talking to me there wasn't really interested in my psychological experience. They were really only interested in my psychiatric experience, like neurological experience. So nobody really wanted to like talk to me about like, oh, what's going on? And oh, like maybe you're like a really insecure teenager and maybe we should give you like some therapy or something, or like a male mentor, or like any of the things that might have been good for me as a human being and a soul and a person. And I was just seen as like a neurochemical imbalance, right? And it's like, yeah, we don't want to hear about that. Here's the pills. Obviously, we don't believe you about those experiences that you know for sure you had telepathic abilities, because telepathic abilities aren't real and only schizophrenics think they're real. So just take these pills, and we don't really want to talk to you. And so I was really surprised by that. I was like, really? Nobody wants to like understand what's going on, or even give me just like a psychotherapist, which seems that's like mainstream medicine, isn't it? Psychotherapy. So none of that was going on. And at the time, I guess my mom was getting into yoga and things like that. And so she was like, oh, maybe I should get him some books on meditation and stuff. And she brought me, while I was in the mental hospital, a book by the Dalai Lama on how to meditate, and a book on yoga, which I kind of flipped through. I mostly focused on the Buddhist and meditation stuff. And so when I got out of the mental hospital, I was like, all right, these pills have already made me pretty fat, and I'm like covered in acne everywhere, and my face is just like a mess of eczema. My sex drive, like within 2 weeks of being on these things, like my sex drive was totally gone. Like pretty like impotent. I had restless leg syndrome. Like my legs just felt angry and numb all the time. I think just part of the almost like chemical castration these pills do to you. They basically block your dopamine, which makes you then get really high in prolactin, which is like the female breastfeeding hormone. So I actually started producing, this is really embarrassing, but small amounts of, I don't know if it was a breast milk or like what was coming out of there. Some kind of like pus was coming out of like my swollen, men have very small mammary glands under their nipples, and mine were swelling and releasing some kind of pus. So not a fun experience to be on those pills. And most of that happened after just 2 weeks being on them, but I stayed on them for like 2 years just because I was so messed up and constantly having these panic attacks. So basically what the pills did was they kind of like numbed everything. So the voices and everything went away, but the underlying like paranoia kind of kept staying there, and it would like come and go with these bouts of panic attacks and stuff. And these bouts of basically feeling like I was on a low dose of LSD, which is kind of what I realized the psychosis chemically probably was like I put myself in like a permanently semi on LSD state where everything was, my mind was incredibly open, prone to hallucination, but also prone to like intense paranoia, which is why once I learned yoga and things like that and learned to relax and let go, even when there's intense fear and voices in your head telling you shit all the time, to even be able to relax during that. Which is like really hard. Like if you think it's hard, like being like quote unquote normal, I know we all got our mental problems, but if you think it's hard, just ignoring or listening to impartially or surrendering to your own inner dialogue when you're trying to learn to meditate or things like that. Try it when you have like 7 dialogues going on from people that you think are actually real people. So not a lot of fun, but pretty intense training. It's kind of like training with a weight vest on, a little extra resistance training. So a really interesting experience. But when I was able to let go, it was just like on an LSD trip, where if you were hanging on and like, oh no, I shouldn't have taken that. Oh, what's going to happen? It's going to be a bad trip. But if you let go and say, okay, I surrender to the wisdom of this molecule and whatever the universe has in store for me, generally it's like a good experience or at least a healing experience that is unpleasant but leads to something good. Generally the case. And so I found the same thing with this. And so those tools helped me to be able to manage those experiences when they came up. And that allowed me to sort of wean off the medication, as I've been saying over and over again on TikTok to all my haters. No, I'm not telling anybody just to stop taking medication cold turkey. Obviously, it was very helpful for me, gave me enough stability to go and then learn those other tools, right? If you don't have enough stability, like I was saying, if somebody's too far gone to help themselves at all, right, then nothing good is going to happen. You need to have your wits about you to be able to do this stuff, because it's not like a tried and true path, right? You're really carving your own path. But once I basically learned to sort of relax into that experience when it came up and sort of deal with it in that way, and that allowed me to work with my doctor to get off those medications slowly. Once I was off the medication, the unfortunate thing was most of those side effects didn't go away. Or if they went away at all, it was like they went away halfway, but they were still half of that problem, right? So then I had to figure out, okay, how do you deal with the side effects? And are those side effects related to how the drug was dampening the psychotic effects? So like if I detox or whatever's wrong with me that's causing these side effects, is then the psychosis going to come back because whatever that was blocking it, right? And that really wasn't the case. I found that getting myself healthier, cleansing my liver, figuring out lots of nutrition stuff that I don't share a lot on YouTube, but I share quite a bit on Instagram and TikTok. I'll probably be doing more YouTube stuff for that soon. And there's a whole lot of nutrition stuff that didn't work. So everybody likes to think like their diet is like the diet that's going to fix everything. But like, obviously it all doesn't work for everybody. But yeah, so I basically found like detoxing my liver, making my gut work better, just improving nutrition and health and stress and things like that in general, made the side effects from that medication gradually go away over time. It took a long time to figure some of them out. But also I called psychosis was also more manageable the more that stuff went away. So it's not super clear that negative stuff has to be there for that healing to happen. So maybe that seems obvious. So yeah, that's basically the whole story of my healing. There's a whole lot more details to that I could get into, but basically did a bunch of psychedelics, had good experiences, did a couple times where I had some weird experiences with some, supernatural stuff, and then a whole lot of paranoia. I forgot to say that there was some brain injuries and stuff in there that probably contributed to me becoming paranoid and everything. Going the Western medicine route of just being treated as a neurochemical case, and that kind of working, but also kind of creating 11 times more problems than it was fixing, but also kind of giving enough stability to move on and figure out how to do it myself, and implementing meditation and yoga to begin with, nutrition later. I'll probably do that all backwards if I did again. I'd start with nutrition and then probably more body-based stuff like yoga, and then maybe add in something mental like meditation. And that eventually helping to resolve the psychosis, both for it to kind of stop happening, but also when experiences like that do happen, now I'm kind of like, sweet. I'm going to have a mystical experience. It's going to be awesome. Because it is awesome when I relax into it. And I think it's like a superpower that I get to tap into now and then. I don't really notice I get a whole lot of like telepathic stuff. But I do notice some interesting stuff where I've noticed omens, or I kind of know something's going. You know, the thing where people like, you're thinking about somebody and then they text you like That kind of stuff happens all the time. And I think Qigong actually amplifies that, to be honest. But anyway, so I do still believe in a certain amount of like supernatural ability sort of latent in humans. But I also totally am on board with, I was like completely paranoid at the time. So I think there's a balance to be had in this conversation, both in terms of how much should you do holistic stuff and how much should you go the pharmaceutical route. I think there can be some balance in that conversation. And in terms of mental illness, like sometimes you're actually right about the thing you're paranoid about, or sometimes there is at least a grain of truth to it. And if mental health providers maybe were a little open to acknowledging that stuff, it might generate a little more trust in their subject. Like if somebody's like paranoid that aliens are controlling the government, right? There's like a secret cabal between aliens and government to like farm humans or something, and that a whole bunch of people are in on it, but nobody's saying it. Maybe they're really paranoid about that. And then for a therapist to go and be like, aliens aren't real, that's silly, or no, aliens aren't real, you're just psychotic. And it's like, well, you can have the debate about whether aliens are real and still address maybe the extreme paranoia of then thinking like all your friends and family are in on it or something, right? It's like there's plenty of sane people who believe in aliens, right? There's plenty of sane people who believe in telepathy, plenty of sane people who believe in astrology, right? Astrology like would technically be under the definition of psychosis, I think, because you believe like your thoughts and relationships and everything are being controlled by a conspiracy of the planets moving around and stuff. I think you could technically label that psychotic delusion. So that line I think is blurrier than we like to admit in the mental health space. I think we could probably meet people in the middle in a lot more places, and you're going to notice that's my theme in a lot of things, because I'm going to be doing more of these talking videos and more interview videos coming out. So you're going to hear a little bit more about what I think about things, and you're going to still move and breathe and all that non-thinking stuff with me, but I'm going to try to do a little more of this type of content. So let me know if you like it, if you want me to keep doing it. I'll probably keep doing it anyways, just because I think it's fun. But one theme you're going to hear from me a lot is the theme of balance. Which side is this? Balance. Which I think is missing from a lot of equations. And yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching this video. I answer most of my YouTube comments, so feel free to throw things down if you want to ask questions. I'm actually starting a course for brain healing, so if you want to hear more about that, go to my website, nickloffree.com. Link will be below in the description. And just jump on my email list, and I'll be sending out more info on that. I think I'm actually going to make like a free mini course version of it, so you can just get started on your own on doing things that can help to heal your brain and spirit and everything if you're going through a mental health problem. And then there will be a bigger paid one that comes out later, which will try to make affordable and accessible and all that. All right, thanks guys. Thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you later.